welcome to another booktube video from me, Lauren, from Lauren and the Books. I hope you're all doing very well. We're about halfway through the year, so it's June, the sixth month of the year, and today we're going to be talking about my top 10 books from the first half of the year. So very excited to talk about these books. I've put them in a sort of like 10 till the number one order. The number one has been the number one in all the lists I've made, but when I first put together the list, they were in a different order. Then when I was thinking about it yesterday, they were in a different order. Today, they're in a different order. So the number one book has remained the number one book throughout all of those lists, but the 10 have sort of moved around. So any other day, you'd get any other order. But yeah, I'm really excited about these 10 books that I've read so far that I've loved. Some of which are a little bit niche towards me. But yeah, I thought I'd share them with you today. And do let me know down below if you've read any of these books, or what your top 10 books of the year so far have been. Very excited. Or even just your favourite book of the year. Just let me know your favourite book of the year. So let's start with number 10. So number 10 is one that I don't have with me because I listened to it on audio, and that's Young Mungo by Douglas Stewart. I have not read Shuggie Bain, so this was my first sort of pathway to Douglas Stewart, and I really loved this. The audiobook was amazingly performed by somebody who is from Glasgow, which is where the book is set, and we're following Mungo, who's sort of growing up in the ganglands of Glasgow with an almost always absent mother, and a brother who's involved in some gangs, and a sister who's trying to sort of like make something of herself, whilst and Mungo, the main character we're following, has is coming to realise his sexuality, and we're looking back on like his young life and his life now and things like that. There's so much plot in here, as well as so much character development, and like I said, the performance was absolutely fantastic. I was sent the proof copy. I do think I will revisit it at some point via the book, just because I enjoyed it so much. But if you can get your hands on the audio, then really do it. But yeah, there was so much feeling there, like particularly with, like I said, Mungo's sort of almost always absent mother, and how much love he has for that woman, Momo, he called her. And I just, yeah, it was just really well done, and the characters in here were amazing. Like, I feel like very rarely do I find a balance between like really plot-filled book with really well developed characters as well. Like sometimes I feel like authors tend to go for one or the other, but this was just perfectly balanced. And yeah, I loved it. And like I said, the audio was amazing, and would highly recommend. Love the front cover as well. Really love the front cover. But yeah, give it a go. Number 10. That wasn't number 10 earlier when I first put it down, but like I've jigged these things around and it's ended up at number 10 today. Number 9 I do have, and that's a non-fiction book, Many Different Kinds of Love by Michael Rosen. A story of life, death and the NHS. So I've read this recently, so you might have seen it feature on my channel a little bit. It featured in my mid-year freakout tag and my my wrap-up. But this is a book about Michael, who is a children's author here in the UK. Many children's books, but probably the famousest one is We're Going on a Bear Hunt. And this is Michael's depiction of when he had COVID, in the first flush of the COVID-19 pandemic. The first bit of the book is about feeling unwell, and sort of text from his wife to family members saying, oh, Mike's not feeling that well, I'm a bit worried about him, or we're going to go and see our neighbour who's a GP, we've heard about this COVID thing, we don't know if it's that. And then very quickly it moves into him being in a coma in hospital, and all of the members of the team who are looking after him writing in a sort of journal to say what's happening to him every single day. He was in a coma, I think, for 43 days. And then you follow his recovery, excuse me, through poems. Very rarely does a book get this much from me. Like, I laughed, I cried, I put it down and sat there for about 15 minutes just thinking about things. I felt grateful for the NHS and everything that they did for us throughout that pandemic. I felt delighted that Michael's family were able to get Michael back after this pandemic and after his illness. And then I thought about the people who didn't get their relatives back after they'd fallen ill with the illness. Like I said, very rarely has a book managed to get so much from me, and even talking about it makes me cry. I recently listened to Michael Rosen on the Elizabeth Day podcast, which was lovely to hear him talk about this book and talk about his experiences as well. But yeah, I don't think this is for everyone, because I think sometimes this is a bit too soon for a lot of people to be sort of like reliving some awful times. And if you lost somebody, I was very fortunate enough not to lose anybody during the pandemic, then I think this will be a very, very difficult read. It was a very, very difficult read for me, and as I said, I didn't lose anybody during the pandemic, but so important. A book that really, really showed that period of time, and I think it will go down, like, honestly, I think it will go down in sort of like the history books as a really good representation of what happened during that time. But yeah, fantastic, amazing. I'm having a hard time convincing any of my family to read it because they know how upset it made me. But if you can, then read it, because it was absolutely fantastic. Number 8, very, very niche book, and I don't know if this will be appealing to everyone, but it's called The Midwife, A Labour of Love. 10 years of life, love and laughter, the official behind the scenes guide. So Call the Midwife is a programme that I love. David and I got into watching it. We watched the whole series, the whole 10 series during lockdown, and it was very much a friend of us. So we started watching it in September 2019, and then got into it, like, and then got really bang into it, like basically an episode a night, when the second lockdown hit. And it was such a comfort to us, and such a cosy piece of telly, but also such an important piece of telly. It starts in the 50s, and you're following a group of midwives from the East End of London, and their rounds and what they're doing and things, and like their community, like district rounds and things like that. So it's not just women's health here, there's all sorts of things, but it's such a good sort of documentation of the advances in medicine and the advances in healthcare since that time. We are only up to the 1967, I think the new series is, so it's really like the amount of changes that have happened in that sort of 17-year period has been amazing. But yeah, so this is, it celebrated its 10-year anniversary, and this is just, if you're a fan, it's just full of absolutely sort of beautiful photography from the show, and then bits about like makeup and hair and how they got the inspiration of that, and how they like decorating the houses and props and things like that, and getting the actors in, and yeah, just, and it's got lovely sort of bits about like when the actors themselves auditioned for their parts and how they got that. So if you're a fan of Call the Midwife, this is an absolute must-have, and I think it'll make a really, really nice gift for somebody who is a big fan of Call the Midwife. But I absolutely love this. I got this for Mother's Day from Minnie, yeah, it was, I loved it, and this is going to be something that I flick through and have always flicked throughout. God, look at Trixie there, she's just a babe, isn't she? So yeah, amazing. Really, really, really enjoyed that very much. Next up is Welcome to Your Life, number 7. Welcome to Your Life by Bethany Rutter. This is one that I've read recently as well. This is a women's contemporary fiction book about a woman called Serena. On her wedding day, she decides, I don't think I'm going to go through with this. I'm not going to marry this guy that I have been with since I was a child, since I was young, met him at university, and I just don't think that I want my life to go in that way. And what it is that Serena is a plus size girl, and she is going for somebody that she thinks she deserves rather than what she actually wants. After that sort of like big event at the beginning of the book, she moves to London, moves in with a friend, gets a job as working as a copywriter for a jewellery company, and sort of discovers London and discovers dating, something she's never done before. And the aim of the book is that she's going to go on a date a week for the rest of the year. And I mean, that doesn't always happen, but it's about her sort of like negotiating the dating scene as somebody new on the scene as a plus size woman. There's so much amazing stuff in there. She's very creative and makes her own clothes, and there's some really great stuff in there about clothes that she wants to wear not being available for a girl of her size, which I definitely feel like, and I'm like sort of down the, I can buy my size on the high street, but even still, I still find that I'm struggling to find things that I want to wear. But she's a bigger girl than I am, and she wants to make her own clothes, and I loved all of that stuff. There's a real great section in there about sort of like her moving to London, and one of the, so I remember talking about this in my wrap up and saying, not to sound like a GCSE English student, but like London's a real big character in here, and the way she talks about London and how much she loves it. I love the dissemination of the dates she goes on. They're almost written in like case studies, and she's like, with this person at this time, what happened, and things like that. I found it really, really fun. And yeah, it didn't end in quite the way I thought it was going to end, but I loved it. I really, really liked it, and I really loved Serena, and I loved sort of like the periphery characters as well. I think this is a great summer read. If you're looking for a summer read, then go for this. But yeah, very much enjoyed it a lot. Next up is The Secret Life of Church Ladies by Disha Filya. This is a collection of short stories, all told about women who attend the church. I loved this. I really enjoyed it. I read it earlier this year, and I loved all the different sort of like the content that you can get in here when focusing on like something like the church and people that attend the church and all these different things that have happened to these different characters. One particular story that I really loved is a story in here about there being a massive storm and everyone being sort of like a bit having to be in their house. They can't leave their house, and there's a couple in here, and they they create a sort of like tropical night to remind her partner of her home, and she turns up the heat in and gets some pineapple juice and and puts on some music and stuff like that. And it really reminded me of like times during lockdown when David and I would like do a pub night or do a cinema night, and we'd arrange the lounge in a different way and stuff like that. And it was just so full of love and loveliness, and it really reminded me of that. But yeah, there's great bits in here. Peach Cobbler was another one I really liked. But yeah, I just felt it was so well done. I think again, what happens with this is when I read these books, I often want to revisit them in a different way, and I've just seen that this is available on audiobook on my Libby app. Might be a bit soon for me to read it now, but next year I definitely will be revisiting it. But yeah, loads of stuff in there about female friendship, relationships. As I said, the church is the theme that runs throughout, but like so many different like lives and stuff like that. Really enjoyed it. Really thought it was great. Then next up we've got two books, neither of which I have here, and they're the two books that I've read from the Six Tudor Queens series. So you may well know I've been reading the Six Tudor Queens series by Alison Ware. I'm working my way through all of them and sort of doing reading vlogs for them. I will link the reading vlogs down below. I've so far done Katherine of Aragon and Anne Boleyn. Next up is Jane Seymour, doing that in July. And yeah, I loved both of these books. I've loved the reading experience around them. I'll start talking about Anne Boleyn because that's the one I enjoyed the least. Very much enjoyed them both, so they're both featuring. So book number 5 is Anne Boleyn and book number 4 is Katherine of Aragon, but I'll start talking by Anne Boleyn first. So yeah, I've really been enjoying reading these in terms of getting to know the characters a bit more and getting to know the sort of stories behind the headline of like divorced, beheaded, died, divorced, beheaded, survived, and then getting to know the characters a lot more and getting to know more of what's been going on around that time. I know it's fictionalised history, but I've very much been like on board with that and getting to know it. I loved both of these books. I liked Katherine of Aragon more, I think, because I liked Katherine of Aragon more. Alison Ware, I don't know how favourably she writes about Anne Boleyn, if I'm being honest. But yeah, really enjoyed both of these books, really enjoying the reading experience, and as I said, we'll link both of the vlogs down below, but I've been having a lovely time with those this year and can't wait to get to the other 4. And then I've got a bonus one, which is like short stories. Can't remember what it's called, but it's like about short stories from a different character from each of those things as well. So very much looking forward to that as well. Then we're into the top 3. So the first one, as in the first one in the top 3, so number 3 is The Opposite of Butterfly Hunting, The Tragedy and Glory of Growing Up, a memoir by Ivana Lynch. This is written by Ivana Lynch, who is an actor and an activist. You may well know her as playing the character of Luna Lovegood in the Harry Potter films. Something that I think is very well known about Ivana, if you don't think about her being... the first thing you would probably know about her is that she was Luna Lovegood in the Harry Potter series, but another well-known thing about her that I knew about her was that she suffered with an eating disorder for most of her childhood. And this chronicles that terrible journey that she went on trying to get hold of her eating disorder, and she talks about it so eloquently and so like it was such a part of her for such a long time, and her recovery from that and her failed recovery from that, and then maybe recovering from it, and how everything in her life changed, from the relationship with her family to her sisters who she was previously good friends with, and then everything in their family became about Ivana's eating disorder, putting her in rehab for it, coming out of rehab, finding her love in the Harry Potter books, finding out that she was going to go for the part, decided she was going to go for the part of Luna Lovegood. She had such a love for Luna, so for her to be able to do that, then her recovery not going the way that that everyone was hoping it was going, and then her having to use sort of like Harry Potter as a we're not going to let you get the next book unless you can get to your target weight and stuff like that. But throughout all of this that's happening to her, and it's very difficult reading. I haven't suffered from a sort of I mean, I'm a girl who was brought up in the 90s and thousands. Of course, I've got a terrible relationship with food. Not so much anymore, but like all the way through school, university, putting myself on diet, forcing myself to do exercise I didn't enjoy, I didn't want to do. Like just so much guilt and everything around food. So even as someone who doesn't have, what I'm saying is that I was never anorexic or bulimic, but even as someone who wasn't that, reading this so hard to read, and just hearing the pain in her voice and the sort of like, how pleased she was after a day of not eating anything and things like that. She's really honest in this. It's the most honest thing I've ever read. I think it opens actually with her saying, oh, do you not think it's a bit cruel? Yeah, is this perhaps a bit cruel? This was the note that repeatedly cropped up in the margins from everyone who read or worked on the early drafts of this book. From my friends, family, editor, copy editor, lawyer, doctor, and also very often from myself. Because it's just the most honest thing I've ever read. So yeah, but throughout all of that, she's just one of the most creative people I've ever heard from. And I loved hearing about the creativity that slipped into every single aspect of her life, even when she was at her lowest of her lows and like they were telling her she's gonna die, she was still making jewellery and painting people's nails in rehab and like writing in her journal and thinking about, like, she's just such a creative person. I also really found the part in here about when she went for the part of Luna Lovegood. She was like a proper like super fan and knew everything about all of the cast, and she had to do like a chemistry read with Daniel Radcliffe, and he was like, oh, hi Ivana, my name's Dan. As you can imagine, he's very sort of like sincere, isn't he, even as a child. Nice to meet you, how's your day been? And she was like, all these facts were sort of like running through her head, like, I know where you grew up, and I know what school you went to, and I know your mum and dad's names, and I know what you got for Christmas last year. And she was just talking about all of that. That was really good. And I also really enjoyed the bit about her competing in the Dancing with the Stars competition in the US, which is like the US's version of Strictly Come Dancing. I love that as well. So there was so much in here to love, but yeah, really difficult reading. I think I said this in my wrap up as well, like, I'm surprised I loved a book about such a difficult topic so much. But yeah, this is another one I want to revisit because I imagine she does the audiobook of it, and I bet it's absolutely brilliant. But yeah, loved that. And then number 2 is Great Circle by Maggie Shipstead. I don't have that here with me. I got it out from the library. It's a massive chunky book, and I read this because it was on the long list for the Women's Prize for Fiction. It's actually made the short list for the Women's Prize for Fiction. It is probably the only book on the Women's Prize for Fiction long list that I loved. I wasn't enamoured by the long list this year. There was a few on there that there was quite a lot on there which I just didn't get on with at all. But this was one that I absolutely loved. Like I said, it's a big old chunky book. It's very epic, and it's about a woman, Marion Graves, who flew this great circle around the earth in a plane, and it's all about her life from her early days of like her mother and father dying, her mother dying during a ship sinking, her sort of fraught relationship with her father being brought up by her uncle. She's got a twin brother. Her twin brother's life features heavily in this. Her lovers throughout the years, her getting into flying, and all the way up until her death. And then we're also following a current timeline about a young actress who's in a sort of like Twilight franchise. She's been going out with her co-star, and then they've had a sort of like falling out, and she's been asked to leave the franchise, and her getting the part of playing Marion Graves in this film that they're going to make of her, and all about her and the similarities in their lives and the differences in their lives and just their lives in general. I loved it. Every time I read it, I was so into it. I was so, like, it was one of those books that sort of like just makes you forget everything else that's going on around you. And yeah, it was just so epic. And like I said, there was just so much going on. Like, to follow a book which follows someone's life in such sort of minute detail, well, that is my bag. Particularly if it's about a strong, like, woman who knows herself and is like, just has got adventure in it. There's so much adventure in here. I really loved it. And yeah, I really hope it wins the Women's Prize. I've got a feeling the Island of Missing Fucking Trees is going to win it, but I really would love to see it win. But yeah, that'd be another really good summer read actually, because it's a very big chunky book, and if like, you could really get yourself invested in it, I reckon. But yeah, really loved it. So number 1, you probably won't be surprised, it's the book I've raved on about all year. It's Slug by Holly McNish, and this is a collection of poetry with sort of excerpts that explain the poetry and explain the inspiration for the poetry. Sometimes you get these before the poem, sometimes you get them after, and all the different poems in here. Like, sometimes, you know, like when you read a book and sometimes you're like, fucking hell, every single word in this book is relevant to me. Like, and I really felt like that. Even the bits in here about parenting, it was really good to see it from like an auntie's perspective, or like from the perspective of my, like me and all of my friends who have children and things like that. Like, that was so interesting. But I love I loved the poems about periods in here. That's my most sort of like revisited section, the poems about periods. But there's also poems in there about her nan, and the loss of her nan, and like the things she was saying about her nan really reminded me about my nan. And there's stuff in there about masturbation. There's like a whole section of fingering poems, and yeah, stuff about like friendship and her relationship with her daughter and stuff like that. And like when it arrived, because the reason I bought this is because Laura, my cousin Laura, and I'd never call her Laura, my cousin Laura, we were going to watch her a talk at Faversham Literary Festival, and I bought the book, and when it arrived I was like, bloody hell, a poetry book that looks like a paperback, I've never seen the like. And then when I got into it, I've always wanted to love poetry, and I have sort of like bad vibes of it from school, like studying to death war poetry and like trying to find stuff in that poetry that I'm not seeing, because I think it's very like, you take from these things stuff for you, don't you? And that's when I'm reading this, I'm like, oh god, that really touches me in a way that like none of the war poems or the poems at school that I studied did. Then when I got this, and it's got explanations and sort of like background towards these things, I was like, bloody hell, this is the dream, this is my dream. This is what I've always wanted. This is what they should be studying in schools, guys. But yeah, I absolutely loved it. I am going to be back and forth to it. You can see how battered the spine is, where I'm literally like opening it and having a look at it all the time. Shall I read you one? I also, when I went to watch her read the poetry, I'd never been to a poetry reading before, and it was just so exciting and so fun, and she was so sort of like unassuming and just sort of like sloped in and read a few poems about fingering herself. Her daughter was there as well. Like, her daughter was in the audience, and yeah, I just thought it was great. Let's have a look and see if I can find one. I tagged one, I remember, which said friends, so let me see if I can find that one that I tagged that said friends. Well, there's the one about missing her gran. Oh god, I don't know if I can read that because it might make me cry. I think this might be the first poem in the book, actually. No, it's not. It's the second poem in the book, but it says, similes about how much I miss Gran. Like spring, when winter runs over and strangers agree, shivering in bus stops, despite the comfort-thick woolen jumpers can initially spark, that they've all had enough of this cold now. Like youth when you're too old to plan, like unbroken bones when they break, like waking to decaf, like blood when it's due, like fat on a newborn, like earrings postpartum, like offers on food you can only afford while the offer is on, like popcorn in those ridiculous cinemas that refuse to sell popcorn, like clouds blocking sun in a park when the light is too fierce for the edge of the white on the page, and the story was getting so good you sweat and you swear and you squint. I miss you like this. Isn't that just amazing? But yeah, it's full of absolute bangers in terms of poetry. But yeah, I'm definitely going to be revisiting that and reading much more of Holly's stuff. Loved it, loved it. So there we go, my 10 favourite books of the year so far. As I said at the beginning of the video, let me know if you've read any of these books, what you thought of them. Let me know what some of your favourite books are from the year. If you've read, I would love to know your favourite book of the year so far. Let me know down below, and I'll see you all again soon for another BookTube video.